Welcome to Shooting Straight with Brad and Casey. I'm Casey Clark, the Navajo County Sheriff. Our co-host today, Brad, our county attorney, is not available, but we have our chief deputy, Jim Molesa, with us.
Sure. And
two lovely ladies. And go ahead and introduce yourselves.
My name is Roxanne Padilla, and I am the Victim Services Manager at the Navajo County Attorney's Office.
And I'm Amy Ferguson. I'm the Crisis Response Coordinator. We're going to talk a little bit about that program today. And I'm also with the Navajo County Attorney's Office.
Well, let's just start right off. What is the Crisis Response Program?
So basically, the Crisis Response Program is a mobile advocacy service that's focused on assisting victims in conjunction with law enforcement. So if law enforcement has a case where they have a victim that they think would use some victim services, if they're in crisis, if they're having an emotional hard time dealing with the situation, then they can call us and we can respond to the hospital or on scene and just kind of assist with all of that stuff that isn't really part of the investigation, but that's really necessary.
So you guys are going to be available 24 hours a day, because bad things happen at all hours of the day, unfortunately. And and we never know when you need. That's great.
So, you know, so when I say this, I'm going to be very careful. When I say, so why do we care about victims? What changed? Because I know that we do care about victims, and we work with them on the law enforcement side and your side, but I know like 20 years ago, this was not a big deal.
No.
So what changed?
Actually, the Victims of Crime Act was established in 1984, and that was really when there was a shift or a movement in as far as victims' rights were concerned. Before 1984, pretty much what a victim was, according to the criminal justice system, according to law enforcement, was nothing more than a witness or evidence. So they would be victimized, and then they would be later called to testify at a trial setting, but they were not provided any information as far as the criminal justice system was concerned. They were not allowed to have any input as far as what was going to happen to that offender. And then in 1984, there was a federal act that changed all of that. And actually that act is what is established the funding tool to allow advocates to be available for victims throughout the state. So one thing I wanted to mention is that our funding for our positions, or any funding that I get for advocate positions, is not taxpayer dollars. It is assessed to a federal fund from federal restitution, fines, fees, and penalties, and then that is distributed to the states and then issued to subgrantees. And your local shelters all have funding through this particular act, and any advocates, domestic violence advocates, sexual assault advocates, a lot of that funding comes from that
so it's literally going back into the community to serve the community and victims of crime.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And it comes
and the bad guys are actually paying for it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I was going to say, it comes from, like, if you think of high-profile cases in the news, things like Volkswagen and emissions, their fines help us actually serve victims on a local level. So it's a kind of a win-win for us.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So, like, having been a detective and working physical sexual abuse against children, young victims, you know, and not only the victims themselves, but their extended family and everything, because everybody kind of gets victimized to a certain extent. There's a lot of needs that go along there. And as a detective, I'm focused working with the prosecutor on getting the evidence, as you said, to pursue the case so we can convict somebody. But there was always that huge piece there that needs attention. So what are some of the services that you guys would come out and provide?
Absolutely. So we are really there at the invitation of law enforcement, but to support the victim. So we're going to explain what the process is. This is a really difficult and different experience for a lot of people. They've never been victimized before. Sometimes they've never had any involvement with law enforcement. So we can go and explain kind of what's happening, what they can expect as the investigation continues. We also have a lot of local resources that we can refer them to, such as shelters, counseling, all sorts of things that they might need at the moment. And our hope is that that would assist law enforcement by helping, like you said, to free them up to do the investigatory part while we handle the more emotional, immediate needs.
So you guys don't get involved in really the trial at all or anything like that. You're just there to secure the victim and secure their needs as far as emotionally, psychologically, and then maybe even other needs that go on. Getting to and from court is always a hassle. because we used to have to go pick the victim up and take them to court and take them back to wherever they need to go. So that's a service that you provide. So we're with the Sheriff's Office, but your service is available countywide for all law enforcement in Navajo County, right?
Well, right now we've actually we've partnered with the Sheriff's Office, and so we're piloting this program, and it's primarily in District 1, so that would be like Holbrook and Winslow. As of October 1st, we're going to have another advocate who will be available in the south end of the county, and then going even further than that.
So the goal is, this is kind of like the first step of a larger picture. So we had done a site visit with Coconino County Victim Witness, and they have a model similar to the one that we are trying to establish, but of course every jurisdiction is unique. Navajo County has its own set of challenges. Sure. So our biggest thing is we're small population-wise, but we're large geographically. So what we need to establish, and what the goal would be, is to also have this transition into a volunteer coordinator position. So we'd have an expert and a trainer who was educated in crisis response and would respond also, but also establish a volunteer program where we can have advocates, a few advocates available in each geographic location that would be on a rotating schedule. And the way the program would work is if the case meets particular crime category needs, like that it was a aggravated assault and the victim needed to be transported to the hospital. It was a sexual assault and they need a forensic medical examination. It's a child abuse case or a homicide. The officer will say, okay, these meet particular criteria. They call dispatch, and dispatch will then call our 24-hour hotline and dispatch an advocate on scene. So that's our kind of, I call it my 5-year plan. I hope to get it off the ground quicker than that, but that was what my mindset was when we decided to establish a program like that and ask for the funding. And we got half the funding, and we're still looking to secure the additional funding in October.
So to the viewers out there, if they're interested or they want to be a volunteer, because that's one great thing about Navajo County, the amount of folks that really volunteer and come to help is incredible. Is there a number for them to call, or an email, or where they can call, and what would that be?
Absolutely. If people are interested, and I've already talked to several different people who were interested in volunteering, if I could actually develop a program like this. So that number would be at the County Attorney's Office, 928-524-4026, and they can ask for me. And what I do is I get their information, and I tell them, when I get this off and going, I'll contact you, and then we'll start from there.
Again, it's Roxanne
Padilla. Yep.
And then get that information off the county attorney's website too.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, we're building a page that talks about our crisis response program, and as well as volunteering. And there's going to be some guidelines. Obviously, if they have a criminal history, that might be an issue. Sure. Over the age of 21, available to respond. It's just geographically, Navajo County is so large. It doesn't make a lot of sense logistically to send somebody from Pine Top to respond in Winslow.
Right.
So eventually, we're hoping to have people a little bit more local.
So when you talk about that, how large the county is, and you're talking Winslow, will this take anything on the on the reservation, whether it be White Mountain Apache or Navajo, Hopi, and would it be, because there's some crimes where it's where it is our jurisdiction, in other words, Anglo on Anglo or whatever. So would it be available? Because that's a long ways to drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're ruling it out.
I think, in your situation where you might have a suspect that you would have jurisdiction in that particular case. So we're partnering with agencies is the best way to kind of think about it, not regioned. Right. And so if the Sheriff's Office has jurisdiction, and they do on the reservation under particular crimes, then our advocate could respond to those as well. Actually, the reservation, I do partner with a lot of their advocates, and they have crisis responders currently that respond to cases on the reservation through the BIA and the FBI. So they are kind of ahead of the game from us, but we're catching up.
So you've kind of said it, but maybe more detail. Why is this program important to Navajo County?
So I think it really helps free up law enforcement to continue with their investigation duties. We're not saying that law enforcement can't answer these questions. They're great at it. It's what they do every day. But for more serious cases, they have a lot of parts of the investigation that they're worried about. So our hope is that we can then step in and really assist the victim and the residents of our community it's a very unique situation. It's a very unique situation being a victim. And so having someone there to kind of explain the process.
And being a victim has a lot of ancillary issues that may not be immediately identifiable. Post-traumatic stress syndrome, lots of different things, and you can help maybe prepare somebody that you're going to deal with these issues, you're going to identify these issues. We can provide you some sort of information so you can get your life back together again, go back to normal.
To elaborate a little bit on what Amy was talking about is the inspiration. So I've been the victim services manager since 2013. So about 4 years now, and the inspiration for this program transpired at a conference I attended in California, and they have a county there called Alameda County. They were able to reduce their victim recantation by something astronomical, like 70%.
You should tell us what victim recantation is.
Victim recantation is if a victim reports a crime and then later takes back that crime and asks for the charges to be dropped. Is kind of the easy way to talk about it. But they were able,
which would be fatal to a criminal case, right?
Absolutely, especially if that victim is the primary source of information, then they would be the only evidence in that case, and we would probably be obligated to dismiss that case.
And the end result is potentially a guilty party is going to go free.
Absolutely.
To victimize somebody else.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you'll see that more commonly in domestic violence situations. And they were able to reduce that in those particular situations by 70% by having an advocate available on scene to that victim within 48 hours of a crime occurring. And that was the spark that led me to want a position like this. And slowly but surely we have been, resources are obviously always a problem for Navajo County. The VOCA grant has expanded drastically in the last 3 years. It quadrupled.
Why don't you tell us what the VOCA grant is?
The VOCA grant is the federal fund that pays for the salaries of advocates. It pays for shelter programs. It pays for our administrative costs. It pretty much runs our program in and of itself. We have additional funding through smaller other grants, and some comes from the county's general fund.
And you said it's tripled in size?
Quadrupled.
Quadrupled. So obviously the federal government has identified this as an issue in our communities.
Yes.
And they want you to service that issue.
Absolutely. And the fund has been growing. If you have Samsung who does price gouging, then let's say they get caught. Well, you can't throw Samsung in prison. So what do? You fine them $6 billion or however much they decide to on a criminal sanction, because it's against the law. It's not a civil violation. It's a criminal sanction to price gouge. And then they have to pay that money, and that goes into that fund. Now that fund has been building and growing, and now I think it was at $16 billion when they decided to increase it. We used to get under $1 billion. Now we get $2.5 billion.
And that's national. That's not the Navajo County.
Nationally, yes, not Navajo County.
So when you said earlier that they identified getting a victim advocate or somebody there within 48 hours, what are you looking at? In other words, do you want to get somebody there within 5 hours, 10 hours, 48 hours? What's your goal?
One of the main concerns is scene safety. So as soon as the officer determines that it's safe to do so, they can call dispatch and we'll respond on scene. Obviously, because of travel time within Navajo County, it may be an hour or two before we can respond, but we'll come out right away.
And that includes Christmas Eve.
Yep. Yeah, it's 24/7. Right now, it's a little bit of a one-woman show, but we're working on it and getting more volunteers. But if we are doing our absolute best to respond, and the types of cases that we're looking at, prioritizing, just because it's going to be hard. There's a lot of misdemeanor cases. Much like we do when we dispatch deputies.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. We're going to focus on homicides, death notifications. If the law enforcement has to go and notify a family member that someone has passed, we'll be able to go with them. Adult sexual assault, child physical and sexual assault, aggravated assault, domestic violence. Those are going to be our priorities, just because there's a lot happening. There's a lot of trauma happening to the victim. And we're going to do our best to try and help guide them through that process.
It's hard to consider all of the emotional aspects that a victim is going through in a moment of trauma. Half of what even a law enforcement officer is going to say to them is going to probably go through one ear and out the other. Just in the course of a normal conversation, how much information do you retain? And so the thing that is valuable about this program is they'll get a referral, they'll have a source of contact whenever they leave and they have questions. They always do. They have someone that they can call. We can help them with a safety plan if they need to get to a safe situation. And we just have availability to a lot more resources than law enforcement would have to help with their urgent, immediate needs.
So you actually coordinate not only between law enforcement, but between your own office and the prosecutors, because the prosecutors sometimes have different needs that they need the victim to do too as well.
Yes, but the thing to remember is we do work for the victim. So, I mean, of course, if their priority is prosecution of this offender, we do everything possible to make sure that that is accomplished.
Absolutely.
And I would also say, adding to that, that this program isn't necessarily limited. Sometimes we have cases where victims are adamant that they don't want to press charges. That doesn't mean we won't respond. If you feel like there's a victim in crisis that could use our services, we will. And then to go along with what Roxanne was saying, we do coordinate with our office. So the crisis response advocate can provide the advocates that would actually be going to court with the victims information about the crime, information about questions that they might have. So it's kind of a seamless transition and hopefully really helps support. Our goal is restorative justice. Our goal is to help the victims feel whole again as much as possible.
And is that what restorative justice means? Because you hear that a lot. That's a buzzword. So getting back to whatever normalcy that there was.
As much as possible. These are terrible situations and we can't do a whole lot to change that from our end, but what we can do is be there to support them, answer questions, refer them to the Victim Compensation Fund, which is also funded by VOCA. It's a program that can allow us to provide financial assistance with things like medical bills, lost wages.
And they would do that through you, through the advocate.
We'd have an application ready to go.
So what happens, excuse me, because many times, I've seen this in my career, we keep on talking about a victim going, I don't want to press charges. What we tell our deputies is, you're going to do the report and you're going to send it to the county attorney's office. The victim really doesn't have a choice on that.
Yes.
Not trying to be mean to the victim or whatever, but
No.
then it goes to the county attorney, and then maybe they do decide to press the charges. To put you in, how do you work with that person then, or do you at all? Or
Oh yes, I mean, since we work for the victim, our job is to, help the victim meet their needs and goals, but also keep them as safe as possible. And it is a challenge. I mean, that's probably one of our biggest struggles, a large volume of our caseload, even at a criminal justice level. And I want to say it's like 70% are domestic violence cases.
Wow.
And we have a lot of domestic violence in Navajo County. And victims oftentimes, what I try to consider when I'm working with a victim who might want to recant is they know their situation better than I do. And sometimes leaving that situation at that particular time is more dangerous for them than staying in it. So I trust that they know their situation better than I do, and whatever I need to do to help them without, lying or falsifying information, giving them clear things, they can still talk to the prosecutor and say, I don't want charges to happen. And we can have that conversation and the prosecutor will decide if they're going to proceed forward, if they have the evidence to proceed forward with that particular case. So I just try to trust that what they're telling me is something that from their own experience, they're telling me out of the safety of themselves.
Sure.
And as an advocate, I can say that we say all the time, once law enforcement gets involved, it isn't a matter of whether or not you're pressing charges.
Right.
It's whether or not a law has been broken and whether or not we have the evidence to move forward.
Because law enforcement has to follow the law too, and the law
Exactly.
demands that we take certain actions.
And for some victims, that can be a relief. It can be something
Sure.
where they now feel like they're not holding this great responsibility by themselves. Now they can kind of pass that along to law enforcement and hopefully find some closure.
sure, they can tell the suspect, I didn't do this.
Right.
It
I've
was-
called.
It was the cops,
Yeah.
Well, Roxanne, you had some other stuff you wanted to talk about today too, and
Well, yeah, so the one thing I wanted to kind of pitch, if I could, was a training project that the county attorney's office is putting on. And it actually, I would like to think of it as a block training schedule that's going to be now starting in September 27th, 2017 through September of 2018. I received funding through VOCA, again, the grant that funds our positions to put on this training, and it's 5 quarterly trainings that are going to be held throughout the county for the next year. And I wanted to kind of go over the topics and let you
Please.
guys know it's free to the public, and they're 8-hour trainings.
So this is for the public, law enforcement, for anybody?
Everybody.
Anybody
Yep.
who has an interest.
Everybody,
First
yes.
responders.
Great.
Yes. And we're trying and working on, I know at least the first 2 trainings are AZ Post accredited, and CLE and COJET are our next 2 accreditations that we're trying to secure. I will hopefully have flyers in the near future, but if you anybody wants any more information, we have a link on Eventbrite under the Navajo County Attorney's Office Victim Services page, and we'll have all of that information there. The first training is going to be at the Show Low City Hall building, and the topic of that is managing people's expectations. So it's an 8-hour training and lunch on your own, but people are more than welcome to register. We do ask that everybody registers on Eventbrite before attending.
So quickly, expectations of what?
Yeah.
Managing a victim's expectations.
Got it.
How, as a service provider, kind of like what we were talking about with domestic violence victims, how are you going to effectively communicate something to a victim? How are you going to manage what they need? And how, as a service provider, how is it that we are able to effectively respond to that type of situation? I kind of wanted to tilt it and have a little bit of it leaning towards particularly working with victims who have mental health issues, because that is a struggle also, and addiction, victims who have addiction issues. So that will be taking place on, again, September 27th, 2017 at the Show Low City Hall building. Our second training is going to be held on December 15th, 2017, and it is focused on crisis intervention services. And that's going to be held at the Winslow Chamber. It's an 8-hour training also. Our third quarter training is on trauma-informed care, and we're actually bringing down a presenter from California, I believe. Her name is Barbara Kendall, and that's going to be on February 2nd, 2017 in Show Low, but I don't quite have a venue yet for that particular one, and that's a 4-hour training. Our fourth quarter training is recognizing the impacts of child abuse and exposure to domestic violence on a child, and how violence affects brain development and resiliency. And that's going to be held in Holbrook at the Public Works off Shevlin Canyon Conference Room on June 13th, 2018. And our fifth quarter training is on sexual violence definitions, dynamics, and prevalence among male victims. And that's going to be held September 26th, 2018 at the Snowflake Fire Department, and that is an 8-hour training.
And these will all be on the county attorney's website.
Yes, and Eventbrite.
And through Eventbrite, first come, first serve, right?
I can have up to 50 people in each training. So yes, first come, first serve, and it's free to the public. We'll bring some donuts and stuff, but people do lunch on their own. And
You looked at me when you said donuts. I mean,
who doesn't like donuts?
so also, I'm sure that will be on the county attorney's Facebook page,
Yes, absolutely.
which people can go on there, and there's always lots of information on the county attorney's Facebook page.
Yes.
So from that, I mean, some of those topics will obviously be more interesting to people than others, but any one of themselves are very dynamic as far as things that occur routinely here, not only in Navajo County, but in Arizona as a whole, as far as victims go. What are some other things that you guys want to share with the public to get the word out that you're available?
Well,
I think really just knowing that we're there as a service, if you've been a victim, even if law enforcement hasn't called us to the scene, which obviously now we're just getting this program started, you can contact our office. It's Navajo County Victim Services. We're located in Holbrook and in Show Low. A number to reach us is 928-524-4026. We'll do our best to refer you to resources. We can help,
Perfect.
like I said, with compensation. There's a lot of resources that we know about, and if we don't know, we're happy to find out. So we're happy. That's literally what we are there for. If you need a court escort, anything like that, we can
So
provide.
the key is they don't need to wait for law enforcement to ask them. People should feel free to call your
Yeah.
office and ask for help and ask for some direction,
yeah.
and go from there.
I always say that, like, I call us maybe the hub of victims' rights in Navajo County. So if we cannot provide you that direct service ourselves, we can at least try to refer you. I implement that policy that we try to always give someone a place to go to get something that they need. They can get help for that. So.
And you were talking earlier, you're developing a pamphlet to hand out to victims, or would you provide more details
Yes.
Tell me about the pamphlet, because I think we'll probably show it on this show at the end of it.
So the pamphlet that we have for crisis response is a little bit more geared to law enforcement because we're coming out at their invitation. So it just explains kind of which types of cases we'll respond to, et cetera. And victims won't be able to contact us directly to come on scene. That's going to come down to law enforcement just because they're the ones kind of responsible for scene safety and not compromising the investigation, and we respect that. But in terms of victim services, Roxanne does have some great informational flyers about all of the services that we offer, and people do not have to wait for law enforcement to call us. Like you said, they can reach out and we will do our best to help them and respond.
And if a victim is in crisis or is on the scene and they've seen this program and they know about the service, they're more than welcome to ask an officer, hey, can I please get an advocate? And the officer can call dispatch, and dispatch
Perfect.
will bring us. Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Okay.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of information today.
Yes.
We appreciate you coming on. We appreciate what you do for their citizens, and especially the victims in Navajo County. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in today. We appreciate you viewing the show, and stay tuned for our Most Wanted for the month.
Here is this month's Most Wanted.
Navajo County Sheriff's Office is currently seeking the location of Wade Madison Flake. Wade is wanted on a felony warrant out of Navajo County from original charges of possession and dangerous drugs. Wade was also ordered to report to the Department of Corrections earlier this month and failed to appear as directed from the drug offense conviction out of Navajo County Superior Court. Wade has been evading contact from law enforcement for the past few months and has not been able to be located in Snowflake or Show Lo's area. Wade should be considered dangerous and a fugitive from law enforcement. If anybody has any information about the location of Wade Madison Flake, we encourage you to contact the Navajo County Sheriff's Office at 928-524-4050, or we tip at 1-800-78-CRIME. A reward may be offered.